Muted.
Available will be available a little bit later for you to be able to review, or if you would like to take notes throughout the thing, we'll be, especially once we get to the competencies, we'll be throwing a lot of information your way, so we want to make sure that you have an ability to sort of make sure that you can review all those things as we kind of bring them up, okay? So, again, this is Debbie and I. Our Twitter handles are up there. Debbie's, I'll let you introduce yourself as far as your position.
My name's Debbie Scheibler. My Twitter handle is @DebbieScheibler. I'm the Assistant Director of Housing and Residence Life at Rutgers University Camden. I've been in this position for the last about 5 years, and I'm super passionate about helping folks get to their next level, so I'm really happy to be here today.
And I'm Shigeru Iwamiya, the goofy-looking guy in the bow tie, the Director of Residence Life at Rutgers University in Newark. Twitter handle SJ and I've been at Rutgers Newark since 2008.
Why the Truth Tellers approach? Well, if you were able to attend the MACUHO annual conference, you saw that Shigeo and I gave 2 presentations with the Truth Tellers tagline. He and I both decided that we felt that it was time for some folks to give presentations that weren't full of fluff, that weren't full of sugarcoating, because unfortunately some folks aren't hearing the real realities of working in higher ed. Sometimes it's not great, most of the time it's awesome, but we wanted to make sure in our approach towards presenting and teaching that we were giving a direct and honest storytelling approach. We're not going to load you up with bull. We want to make sure that you guys are prepared for what is about to come your way. And we really hope that you can kind of take a grain of salt, because there will be some reality check moments during this session. And we might challenge some of you to reevaluate if it's time for you to be searching. And sometimes that's a hard pill to swallow, to realize you actually do need some more time in your position to get yourself where you need to be.
So really quick, we wanted to kind of go over a typical timeline, or at least maybe not so typical timeline. The green line at the bottom is a housing sort of timeline. So let's just assume that you are a pre-entry-level undergraduate student when you started off over here, and just talk about your sort of a multitude of sort of the messy timeline that people would go through. A lot of times you go from a pre-entry undergraduate student to a graduate student, and sometimes after the graduate student you just say, let me switch fields and go out of housing and go into a different field or something like that. Sometimes after that switching field you might actually say, no, I don't even want to be in student affairs anymore, and you just leave. A lot of times people talk about, and this is the truth teller approach, so I'm going to really talk about, you know, there's 7 hall directors and only 1 assistant director or 2 assistant directors. If everybody wanted a promotion, unfortunately, sometimes it doesn't happen. So you have to be strategic about when do you enter the field as well as when do you exit the field in some ways too. But a lot of people are back here at the professional staff, so let's go right back over there. Some people will then either become a mid-level professional staff from here, or they'll switch out to becoming a mid-level in a different field, like a programming office or a Title IX office or judicial affairs or something like that. And sometimes from the mid-level position of a different field, they'll go into a senior level position like a director of a multicultural center or something like that. And then after that, once they realize that they don't want to stay in student affairs, sometimes they'll just leave the field from right there as well. But a lot of us, again, mid-level, kind of come into the assistant director type positions, and then usually go into the chief housing officer if that's what if you think that you're a life for housing type person, and then eventually some very, very few of us will make it to the dean of students. And I just to kind of put this timeline thing up there, just to kind of show how messy and sort of timeline is. It's not necessarily always you are having issues with me. Hello? Can you hear me now? Hello?
Hello?
Okay, you can hear me. I can continue with what we're talking about. Because you were breaking up just a bit, my friend. Thanks for... Shigeo, do you want to try? Okay, so I guess some other, all right. Oh, good. This is great. This is good. We're rolling with this, folks. All right, what Shigeo was saying, you know, we've got the the traditional trajectory, which we've illustrated the green, anything with a purple there is a who goes in a non-traditional way. What we want you guys to know about our approach here for the Truth approach to a job search is that we are not expecting one person to stay on the green path. Every career takes you, that is great. Now, the reason it's truth tellers is you will sometimes hear folks say like, oh my gosh, you're jumping ship, you're going to the dark side, oh, you're leaving the field, oh, you're leaving MACUHO. At the end of the day, you live your profession. You know, it's a concern that so often folks are into staying in a field they think. So we really want to make sure that everyone feels comfortable. We want you to search for you. Are we still breaking up, or is everyone okay?
Can you hear me now?
Can folks hear me? Sweet. All right. All right, Shigeo, I think you're back on track. Run with it.
Can you hear me now, though?
Yep.
Earlier, I think one of my
difficulties in the first run.
That was really, really weird. We didn't have that kind of sort of dress rehearsal problem. So what we want you to do is to really be honest with your skill level as to what you're good at, what you're not good at, what you really feel like you need to grow, and to be really honest where you feel like you want to be challenged a little bit more and where you need to be supported a little bit more. Where talk to your supervisors to understand what are your areas of opportunity and all those other kind of things as well. As well as, you know, earlier in the stuff that you couldn't really hear me say about where your career aspirations were going to be honest with that. Do you want to stay in student affairs? Do you want to stay in housing? Do you want to be the director of athletics opposed to the director of housing someday? It's okay to be whatever you want to be, essentially, but it's critical that you need to be very honest with your career aspirations, because if you're not, then you become something that you really don't want to be, or stay in housing too long, or live on campus too long, and that's never a good place to be. That contributes to the whole burnout aspect as well.
So why search? There's a lot of different motivating factors as to why you guys are listening in on right now. Some of you are job searching for yourself. Some of you are trying to advise your staff members on what their next step should be, and some of you are looking for really qualified candidates. Some folks here are just craving more responsibility. You feel you've reached the edge of where you can go and you're ready for more. Some of you are really happy with what you're doing, but you might just want to change it up, like Shigeo and I were saying. It might mean you change from housing residence life, you go into conduct, or you go into student activities, or it just might mean a different change of scenery for a different institution. Some of you are looking for more money. We all know we're not going to get rich in this field, but absolutely progression is important, and it's nice to have a few more dollars in your pocket. And so absolutely, with a new position can mean increased income. And bottom line, some of you are just great at what you do, but your institution is not a fit with you, whether that's philosophy, whether that's you are butting heads with your coworkers, your possible supervisor, and that's all okay. There's a lot of different reasons as to why you are ready to search. And we're going to go through and talk to you about how you can assess if you, in fact, are ready for that next position. But also, again, acknowledging just because it's hiring season doesn't mean it's time to start throwing out those resumes.
So real quick, we wanted to talk a little bit more of the competencies, and this document is available through the MACUHO website, but we wanted to talk about these because of the fact that sometimes when the only opportunities that you get a chance to talk about these competencies are the chances that you get in those specialized conferences like RELI or NHTI or something like that. And so we wanted to make sure that everybody here had an opportunity to hear those things, to make sure that we kind of went over them, because we think that by going over the competencies a little bit more, you can strategize your job search a little bit stronger as well. These are the 12 competencies that are listed in that particular document, and we'll go through these competencies very, very briefly, and if you have a pen and paper, this is a good time to kind of bring that out right now.
All right, so the first one we're going to talk about is ancillary partnerships. Again, what Shigeo was saying is sometimes these competencies are not going to be explained to or introduced to you until you get to something like RELI or NHTI. So we do want to make sure that you are prepped and ready as best as possible. Ancillary partnerships deal with public-private partnerships, the 3 Ps. You might have seen those in talking stick articles. You might have something on your campus that deals with a public-private partnership. It's not everywhere, but it's absolutely on the rise. And if you're looking to proceed further down the road in housing and residence life, you really do need to familiarize yourself with what the realities are of our housing residence life footprint. Some institutions are getting, well, all institutions are getting cut back in their budgets, and a public-private partnership is a great way to have residential facilities built or renovated. And so it's really important that you are understanding kind of how that plays with the culture of your campus and also the politics of that. Also, specialized housing. If you have any experience working with Greek housing or veteran housing or family housing, please make sure that you are articulating that on your resume and also in your interview. Hiring managers are really looking for that in their senior level management. So conference services. If you work in housing and residence life, you know that the summer is not a break. We are constantly working, and one of those reasons is because of our camps and conference services that are occurring typically in the summer. Now, if you're lucky enough to be at a campus that has its own events office that runs these for you, you are quite lucky. But if you are someone like me at my campus where camps and conference services are run right through your housing residence life office, it's really important to understand why that is. For many institutions, auxiliary or not, a conference service is a source of income that you rely on for your budget. It's also an opportunity that you're providing customer service in a different way to a different population staying in your building. Some folks want you to provide staffing and developmental opportunities and programs to their group, and some folks just want a bed to sleep in. And different groups need different things, but truly conference services is a huge source of revenue and a very real reality for many of us in housing residence life. So if you have this experience, make sure that's out on your resume. Make sure you're talking about it in your cover letter. If you don't, make sure that you're seeking out a way to become exposed to this.
Crisis management is another one of those big ones. A lot of times people have those proverbial 3 a.m., 4 a.m. phone calls. A lot of what we do in those sort of crisis response and management things are the things that we do for intervention. A lot of those responses of the trip to the hospital or the flooding that happens and all those other kind of things are things that we have to respond to. And also think about the things that as you move up higher in your world, or even if you're in any kind of training activities, like it's the Title IX training or cleric training that you attend, those are prevention models, right? So then you have to understand, how do we educate people to have reduced harm on drinking, or how do we educate people on reduced harm for sexual assault and all those other kinds. Those are prevention type of things too. So both for prevention and intervention, crisis management is probably one of the biggest components of a liability piece that we respond to all the time. Dining services is one of those things where, you know, a lot of our schools are starting to become more and more separate, where dining services is more contracted out to another institution, but a lot of those schools sometimes do still have the collaborations with dining. We want to make sure that if you do like that aspect of dining services, that you have an opportunity to talk about it. Maybe you don't actually have any kind of direct responsibility, but certainly working across the sort of the bridge and making sure that you're creating strong partnerships with dining services is very important.
Evaluation and planning. I don't know of a single chief housing officer out there that does not value assessment. We have to prove our spending, prove our programming, prove our existence to folks who are in academics who don't get the student affairs side of things. And so it is so critically important that we are exposing ourselves to that scary, scary word, assessment, because it is a thing and it matters and it supports what we do. And having data is how you can get things done. If you are able to be a part of a benchmarking survey, if you do your own homegrown, if you're part of a departmental assessment, whether you're using CATS or you're using a MACUHO standards, make sure that you are putting that out there and embrace it. I know it's scary. Numbers are hard. Data's not necessarily fun. But if you're, find a data nerd out there that can help break it down and demystify it for you. But assessment lets you know where you've come from and where you need to go to create change, to justify purchases, to justify changing things up completely. It is so important that you start having a data-focused mind and also one that can think forward and think ahead. And we'll talk about that a little bit more as we start getting to strategic planning. So facilities management. Some shops out there work very closely with their campus facilities management. Some shops out there actually supervise and oversee their own maintenance and or custodial staff within their own housing and residence life department. So whatever applies to you, you need to understand how the physical infrastructure of your campus works. You know, you've got the amateur plumber RA who can report a leak of a toilet or a sink, but who do you call on for help at 2 o'clock in the morning when you do have that pipe burst? Or how do you make sure that you're communicating to your staff to make sure that vacuuming the halls is more than just cleaning up dirt, but it helps in retention and it helps in marketing? We all have a part to play in contributing to the success of our housing residence life programs and the happiness of our students. And having a better understanding of the work that is done by our facilities management folks is very important. Also, when we're talking about data, is it time to reevaluate the products you're using? Do you need to evaluate your sustainability plan? Do you need to change your extermination plan so that it's safer and healthier for your folks that live in the building year-round? These are all things that you should be thinking about, whether you're an entry-level or you're a senior housing officer. All of these things directly impact the quality of life for those living in your residential halls.
So we want to take a moment to kind of sort of reflect. Is there any questions? If you have a question, or take a look at maybe the Twitter feed or something, Stephen, if you could help us out with identifying some questions real quick, if there are any. Maybe we've muted him. There are no questions.
I have tried to unmute him.
If you do have a question, feel free to use the text chat box and feel free to ask us a question, and as they come up we'll be able to respond to them, or if there's a point where we can pause for a second, we can answer those. But if you do think of a question, feel free to use that in the chat box right over here. But until then, we'll keep going, and no on social media as well. Okay.
Great. So budgeting and fiscal resources. I don't care if you manage $30 or $300,000. You need to make sure that that is on your resume. I don't want to hire someone for my department that can't manage money. I don't want them losing money. I don't want them misappropriating funds. I don't want them overspending when they could have been smarter with what they're looking to buy. I need to see from a candidate that they have some kind of understanding of how money works, how budgets are allocated, how they can stretch a dollar. As we said before, so many of us are getting our budgets tighter and tighter and tighter, and some of us are just getting our budgets completely eliminated. You need to have an understanding of how that impacts the services you can offer, and also the creative thinking that you need to have to stretch that dollar, where before you were spending $1, now you're spending 50 cents. I want to see what a candidate is doing to show that they are fiscally responsible. Likewise, the higher up you go, the money coming in your budget can directly impact the staffing you're allocated. I know for me and mine, you know, our budget changed so drastically that I lost a professional staff member and was not able to rehire it. That drastically impacts and changes the workload of folks and the expectations of the department. So I want to know from a candidate that they have been a part of those discussions and they have a clear understanding of how to make money work. Also, if you don't have that experience, talk to your supervisor. If you don't manage a budget, ask if there's a small budget you can oversee. Start with RHA, start with the RA programming. If you already manage a budget, ask if you can manage more. Ask if you can see how the department, the budget is set if you don't already make that decision. If you don't participate in purchasing, ask if you can sit in on a conversation about buying new ceiling tiles or buying new furniture or buying a bunch of glue and markers, whatever it is. Get an understanding for the purchasing procedures at your institution and be able to speak to that. Student affairs professionals are notoriously crappy at human resources. We get really excited about bringing people in, and we kind of jump right in, and it's baptism by fire, and off you go and you're running. But we really do need to take a step back and understand the entire human resources approach. That is how we recruit, and that's what's happening right now, folks. It is hiring season. So I hope that those of you who are searching are really paying attention to those job descriptions, because hopefully they are not just giving you information about the position, but also the culture of the institution. Those of you who are looking for folks, if you're employers, I hope that you know how your process works so that you can share that very clearly to your candidates. Is it as simple as you make the final decision? Do you have to go up to a hiring manager? Do you have to get approval from the board? Do you have to get approval from your dean? Do you have to get approval from the HR office? There's a lot of things that can come into play in terms of bringing someone on. Now, once they're here, how do you onboard them? Is it, hey, go fill out your health paperwork with HR, I'll see you back here, and we'll get right to work? What kind of onboarding process do you have? How are you taking care to integrate your new staff member into your culture and also find out where they fit and checking in with them? Are you providing them the proper training? The higher up the chain you go, the more we're going to want to see you have the ability to seek out quality candidates, to onboard them correctly, to train them, sustain them, and hopefully retain them, and if they do leave, that they're at least a great reflection of your experience as a supervisor. If you have the amazing experience of working with unionized staff, you need to understand how that union contract comes into play for your employee, and also how you as a supervisor need to interact with those individuals. It's not the same way as if you were sitting down with an RA for a performance evaluation. If you have a unionized staff member, you need to understand what progressive discipline might be if you have to go down that route, or what you can require of them in terms of additional hours outside of the traditional 9 to 5. So you really have a great responsibility in working with professional staff members.
And also, never, for those people that are maybe live-in staff that don't supervise a professional staff, don't underestimate your ability to supervise a paraprofessional staff, right? Because you do the recruitment, the training, the orientation, the supervision, all those things. You just have to reframe that in a way that says, I don't yet supervise professionals, but I'm ready to supervise professionals. So you have to think about it in those natures as well. For information technology, this is not just about, like, do we Facebook or do we Twitter or do we kind of sort of use social media or Instagram or anyway. This is more of the bigger picture information technology, like the systems, administration issues. How much server support do we have? Do we have back-end access to websites? All those other kind of things. It's security protocols, both the computer cybersecurity as well as sort of potentially having security front desk sort of supervisors. Are we on a PeopleSoft? Are we on Banner? What kind of management software are we using? Thinking about those kind of things as information technology is a very critical point, because this is an area that's constantly changing. We are certainly evolving quickly to making sure that we are using the newest, shiniest technology, especially as we move forward, as less and less key options are happening and more card access is happening. Those information, how do we keep that information secure? How do we sort of make sure that we understand the programming skills required to programming a door versus just cutting a key nowadays? So this information security technology area is starting to grow in a tremendous way as well.
Occupancy. So for me and mine, I don't have a ton of experience working in occupancy, and that's an area that I know I need to grow and work on. And we talked about knowing yourself. As you start working your way through from undergrad, grad, entry-level, mid-level, if you are seeking to stay in housing and residence life, or if you're seeking to oversee housing and residence life, you need to start obtaining information that helps you to get a clear understanding of how operations, occupancy, retention, projection all come into play. When you get that call from your dean saying, like, hey, what's our occupancy number? I don't know, is not an acceptable answer. That helps to understand how you can budget. That helps you to understand how you're recruiting. Is it a heavy year that you have to bring in 50 students, or is it a lean year where, really, we only need about 15 to get to our occupancy goals? You're going to be asked those things, and if you do not have an understanding of how that works, you need to seek that out. And you also need to remember, we just had RA Appreciation Day yesterday, the role that everyone plays in occupancy, the role that everyone plays in retention. We all have a part to play in making sure that our students are satisfied living here, because if they're not, they will find a new place to live. And so it really is important that you sometimes have to step outside of your fun, programmatic, touchy-feely world, and again, jumping back into data, understanding how we fill those beds, how we get people to commit, how we get people to put in those housing deposits and say that they're going to be here, and how do we look forward, a year from now, 2, 3 years from now, how do you project to know if you need to build a new residence hall or seek additional housing to avoid triples? Residential education services. So a lot of folks out there might have recently had some title changes to their office from housing and residence life to perhaps residential education or residential education services. More and more, we are beginning to acknowledge our own role in the educational experience of our students. And I think that's great. I think that's really important to understand that we're all educators in what we do, regardless of whether you're faculty or not. And it's very important on your resume you can articulate the programs that you're doing are intentional and how they contribute to the mission that you have, or your programming curriculum, or the pillars of your institution, so that you're showing a holistic educational experience for your students. That's also, again, a great marketing tool in terms of how you can say living on campus benefits a student. But you need to make sure that you're checking off that developmental aspect. I know when it comes to training resident assistants, more and more I'm seeing my colleagues infusing student development theory as part of their residential education training, so that RAs and grad students and entry levels can see the part that they play in the growth of our students. If that's something that you have experience in, make sure that's very, very clear on your application materials, so that folks who are looking to hire someone who's got that experience know that you're going to rise to the top on that.
And who doesn't like a good student behavior issue, right? A lot of us are managing conduct cases and all those roommate conflicts and conflict resolution cases and all those other kind of things. This can include, obviously, student behavior modification programs. So all these educational sanctions or conduct hearings or student conduct boards that you manage, or any of those things related to some sort of a student behavior, whether it's working with the counseling center and managing all of the alcohol and other drug programs and managing those sanctions. These things are critical things, not just from the student behavior and managing the behavior itself, but putting policies into place so that you're now creating protocol as to how to manage student behavior. That's very critical for the ways that we sort of operate, and it's a huge success point of our competencies. There are now becoming more and more positions, especially at larger institutions, like case managers or care teams or threat assessment teams, and all those other kind of things are now in place. If you can be on those positions or being at the table at those kind of conversations, or even being able to talk about those positions, it is a very, very critical piece to our housing and residence life sort of operations these days now. So here's a quick review of all the 12 that we just talked about, just in case anybody missed any of them. But basically, it's areas. It's kind of like a Trivial Pursuit pie in some ways, with a little bit more than just 6 pieces that kind of come together and kind of form our field. So let me apply this to how a resume might actually be built based on this. So let's just assume that we throw out a resume out there. This is my sort of mock interview here, mock resume here. It's a really dumbed down version of my resume, I should say. There's my education. Shout out to Salisbury University and St. Cloud State University. But let's just say, let's take this experience real quick. The LaSalle University Philadelphia piece supervised 9 resident assistants and all the other kind of things. And let's take a look at closely as to what competencies are being affected here. So as you can see, if you go line by line, bullet by bullet, it's human resources, crisis management, residential education services, behavior services, student behaviors, and facility management, quite literally. So if you wanted to look at this from a how do I sort of enter a job search with confidence, supervising nine employees might not be enough. So if you say human resources, and I'm hoping I'm not breaking up because there's nobody saying anything so far.
Good.
These are the things that we just talked about. So clearly, supervising 9 residents can be expanded to something like recruit, select, and train 9 paraprofessional staff and manage the biannual performance appraisal process. I'm not saying anything different than what I just said previously, but I'm making a very, very competency-based approach on my resume to beef up my resume to make sure that I'm stronger, more confident in those job processes. Same for crisis management, prevention and intervention. So let's change this language to participate in the intervention-based duty rotation for campus of 2,500 students. Residential education services, no different. Personal development, all these things that we just talked about, let's change the language. Advise the hall council to our community and personal development models alongside executive board leadership initiatives. Same for the conduct cases, same for the sort of maintenance issues. Use the language that makes more sense based on a competency base. So let's go back to the resume and take a look how it looks right now. You can clearly see the LaSalle University difference, coincidentally both institutions that I've ever worked with. And you can kind of sort of tell the difference when you make your language much more strategic and intentional about the competencies that you use and put them into a little bit more practice. Now, obviously, I would never recommend putting 12 bullets on your resume per se, and maybe that's where the cover letter and other positions come into play, or if you can highlight different positions so that you can reflect all those 12 fields in some way, shape, or another to kind of sort of boost up your sort of chances of your resume to be seen quickly. It makes a huge difference to be able to present yourself in this way versus a way that sort of doesn't outline in a really strategic way.
And for those of you out there that, since it is hiring season, you have colleagues or you have staff members coming to you saying, hey, I need some help with my resume, I hope that you're able to then articulate back to them exactly what Shigeo just gave as an example. When we're helping folks with their layout and their content, that we as editors have a very critical eye as well, so that when we're giving feedback about how to essentially beef up that resume, you also are using the lens of the competencies to help our students and our staff members to have the best representation of themselves on paper as possible.
So this is exactly where you can find these competencies at the MACUHO website, which is basically macuhoi.org/course-competencies. Right there, if you're a member institution, you can click on that link right under the body of knowledge, and it'll take you to the login site. You can download that whole thing. If you're not a member, right under these little 12 competencies will pop up, and these are all drop-down boxes, and all you have to do is click on one of those, and exactly the same information that we just presented will be available right there at your fingertips.
So before we jump into interviews, I wanted to address a question that came through on the chat box. This question came from Allie, and they asked, I understand some institutions may do internal searches for positions, but may be required to post the position online. How do you react as a staff member at the hiring institution when a closed search is occurring, but the position is posted publicly? Shigeo, you want to take the lead on that?
You know, that's a one
we operate in a similar way at Rutgers.
What was that?
We operate in a very similar way at Rutgers in terms of internal and external searching and publicity.
Right. Well, if you're a public institution, you legally have to post it, right? Even if you have an internal candidate or whatever it may be. I guess I'm not understanding the question entirely too well, unfortunately. So Debbie, if you want to take that question, and once you start answering, I might understand it a little bit differently.
Sure. And Allie, on the chat box, let us know how we're doing in terms of addressing your question. So the way that I see this is, okay, institution internal search. How do you react as a staff member of the hiring institution with a closed search? So if you know that you are an internal candidate and it's being posted publicly, you know, I guess you have to, for me, you have to kind of consider the politics. Do you know if, as an internal candidate, was the position written for that internal candidate and they're only posting publicly because they legally have to? Or are you feeling, as an internal candidate, you know, you kind of have it in the bag and you feel slighted? I guess those are the two things that I'm thinking of as if I were in that shoes in terms of like how to respond. I will say, regardless of whether it's a public or private posting, I approach when I'm job searching with the same intensity and the same focus as, this is not mine and I do not have in the bag and I need to prove myself every time, regardless of who I know. If you end up showing up and there are folks that you know on the selection committee, you act like you don't know them and you treat them the same way that you would if you were doing any job search. If you know that you have peers that are against you, so to speak, as a candidate in the candidate pool, hey, like Shigeo said earlier, there are less jobs the further up you go, and there will very likely be an opportunity where you will be in competition with someone. But again, this goes back to, what does your resume look like? What does it say about you? Do you have a stronger resume and a clearer conveying of the information that the experiences that you have based on, you know, including competencies, based on data, showing numbers? It really, for me, will come down to that kind of information that you're presenting. So it shouldn't matter whether it's public or private. You're going to be the best candidate out there.
That's great. I'm not. Oh, great. Allie said thank you, so that's great.
Good. Yay, glad that we could help.
So should we
Okay,
move?
so interviews. We'll jump into that.
Okay.
So we've gotten you, or I hope that we've inspired you to take a good hard look at your resume. I hope, as hiring managers out there, you have a more critical lens when you're evaluating folks. So now we get to the interview, right? We know that a job application, a cover letter, and a resume gets you that face-to-face interview, and in a perfect world, that on campus, because now you know you've arrived. These might seem like the more typical job interview how-tos, but they cannot be understated because they are very important. Understanding competency-based questions. That means you need to prep yourself to ask them and also to field them. You need to be prepared to speak with authority and a competent-based mind on the experiences that you have. Simply just quick responses of, I supervise 10 RAs. Yep, Yep, we do fun programming. We went to Dave & Buster's for RA retreat. Like, that's cool. That's not going to set you apart. You need to be able to really articulate yourself well. So be prepared to be asked difficult, challenging questions in your interview. Having your stories ready. That means we just gave you 12 competencies. Be prepared to respond on each one of those 12 and all the areas that you list in your resume. Make sure that you have a clear, concise, appropriate response, an example of all of those areas that you can speak to. If they ask you a conduct-related question, you're ready. If they ask you an operational or assignment-based question, you're ready. And even if the answer is, I don't have that experience, like Shigeo said previously, I don't have that direct experience in my department. However, here are ways that I'm either gaining that experience, or here are ways that I support that initiative within our office. So always make sure you have a response. Don't just say, I don't know, pass. That's not going to set you apart. So make sure that you have those stories ready, you practice them, and they're easy for you to pull out and speak to. Communicating confidence and gravitas. When you arrive at that interview, you're going to have an aura about you. You're going to have a vibe about you. And it's really important, I feel, that you are coming in very confident in a job search. I have sat down with candidates before that are overconfident because they know me and they come off a little cocky at times. You want to make sure, again, you are in competition with, in some places, 100, 150, 200 applicants have applied to this job. So don't let your head get too big in the fact that you move forward, but please also keep that humility to know that you don't have it in the bag, so you need to exude confidence in yourself and your abilities. And practice, practice, practice. Role play. Get in front of a mirror. Get on the phone with a friend and ask how you speak. Practice a Skype interview or an UVU interview or some kind of experience that you are prepping before the big game, so to speak. You can never over-practice for an interview. You can never over-know, so to speak, your resume. So it's critically important that you take your job search seriously. I've heard some folks say that a job search is like a full-time job to get a full-time job. And that is actually very true. And you need to really put a lot of time and energy into it so that you are clearly showing that you are the candidate that is the most competent, the most prepared, the best for the job.
And practice with somebody you know, too, actually, because, it's the most awkward thing to interview with somebody that you know that's supposed to know your skills, but to be able to communicate to them in an articulate way, to be able to sort of kind of own that awkward place will get you prepared for interviewing with strangers so much better. So just practice with the most awkward people, meaning like the people that know you the best, because I think that will really, really set you apart, really, when the time really comes, then those interviews actually matter.
Okay, interview etiquette. Kind of the same thing again. Appearance matters. Do not show up in your jeans. I don't care how casual the office might appear. I don't care if you know the people. You need to dress that you want. You dress for success, and that matters. So make sure you iron. Please iron. If you don't know how to iron, learn how to iron. Make sure that you are well-groomed. Just show up for the job that you want, not the job that you currently have. Presence matters. Again, we talked about kind of how you carry yourself, how you speak to others. The second you step off of that airplane or walk through that lobby or hop onto that computer and do that online interview. The second that happens, you are job searching. If you're going to MAPC in a few weeks, as soon as you walk through that hotel lobby, it's on. If you're going to TPE, if you get an on-campus, you need to remember that. If you get to a position and your interview's at 8 in the morning and you show up at 5 till 8, no, that's unacceptable. Make sure that you're showing up early. How you show up matters. Are you talking to people when you're sitting there waiting for your chair to come and get you? If you're sitting, are you speaking with the receptionist or the student staff members that are sitting there? That's a great time to make a great impression with folks that otherwise might not see you or otherwise might not be in the interview, but I'm sure they're going to give really positive feedback about the candidate that actually acknowledged who they were or introduced themselves, regardless of where they were in the job search. I know that when I have folks come and interview with me, I go out and I ask my office staff, how were they when they came into the lobby? Excuse me, guys. And finally, never underestimate the power of a firm handshake. That is, to me, the bookend. Introduce yourself, make eye contact, and a nice firm handshake at the start, and the same at the end. It seems a little old school, but it still holds a lot of weight.
So I saw a question that came in about does applying through higher ed jobs hold the same weight as going through the placement conference or any online application to the school site or through a school site or being referred? So if a lot of schools are, I would say that if a school is going to both, for example, a placement conference and posting on higher ed jobs, I do believe that unfortunately right now the field is leaning towards going to a placement conference if they're posting both places, right? So because the face-to-face value is far more impactful than a higher ed jobs. So for example, if we posted something at higher ed jobs but also went to MAPC and searched for the same exact position, we're probably going to find probably 75% of our candidates from a MAPC versus the 25% that came from a higheredjobs.com. Not because it's anything different or less, it's just that face-to-face, oh, I got to see them, I got to know them, I got to see their body language, so much more powerful at a placement conference. Is it fair? Probably not, but at the same time, that's kind of how it's leaning towards right now.
Yeah, I would agree with what you're saying, Shigeo. And I would also say if you can't go to a placement conference, but you're able to have a Skype interview, that also is going to give you an opportunity over just dropping your resume in, which is going back to why it's so critically important that your resume does stand out in the event that you don't have the funds or the availability to get to a placement conference. And I know that that applies to a lot of folks that are job searching who just aren't going to be able to make it to TPE this year or just aren't going to make it to Oshkosh or MAPC. And so, but yeah, I'll agree with what Shigeo is saying. The opportunity to see someone face-to-face and get a read on them, so much more valuable as an employer than just seeing something on a sheet of paper.
But also to Natalie, just a reminder that the schools that are going to these placement conferences are definitely in the minority, actually. There are more schools that are posting things online than going to a placement conference. So I would say don't just get discouraged. You know, the big schools will probably be at the placement conference, but those schools, especially if you're doing a geographic search and you know that the placement conference, for example, this year's in Indiana, that maybe I'm only looking for Florida, maybe there's not any Florida schools going to Indiana or something like that, feel free to keep applying online because that's clearly when they're posting it both for legal reasons as well as sort of obvious reasons because it's cheaper to go to an online method rather than a placement conference. So I would definitely not get discouraged by that, but if you definitely know that they're posting or they're going to be at a conference or they even say, hey, we're going to be at TPE, make sure you apply there, that's a clear sign that they're preferring one method or the other.
We have another question in the chat box, and again, make sure that you're sending stuff to the Twitter feed if you want to ask that way too. So this question pertains to on-site interview portfolios. What items should our folder contain other than the copies of our resume/cover letter? Is there anything in particular that interviewers want to see during the meeting? I know for me personally, it depends on the level of the position that I'm interviewing for. If I'm looking for a master's level pro, me personally, I'm looking at their resume and their experience. If they have any awards that they've been given or any presentations that they've done. I hope that that's included clearly in their resume, but I'm not really looking for a binder full of information. Now, the flip is, I know me personally, if I'm looking for a grad, I'm okay with them bringing out examples of great programs that they've done, simply because I want to see a little bit more of the arts and crafts and the hands-on things based on the needs that my positions have. I will tell you, when I was in grad school and I was interviewing for my first professional position, I brought my entire binder portfolio with me to TPE, and I got really mixed feedback from folks. Some folks thought it was great, and some folks clearly were not too amused with me pulling out my binder of stuff. So my suggestion is, it is kind of a personal choice, but if you are interviewing for a professional level position, I personally would expect you to present a professional self and your resume and allow the conversation to be how I get a read on you. Agree or disagree, Shigeo?
Yeah, I would agree. I think the in-person portfolio would be for maybe the hall director position or grad positions, maybe more grad position than hall directors. But if I was interviewing for a hall director position, or at least I was interviewing hall director candidates, I would want them to give me a and a lot of times I don't even need the resume because I've already seen it, and that's why I'm interviewing at a placement conference, right? So an interview, a cover letter, maybe not even the cover letter, and maybe a sheet of references is something that I would maybe hand over through a portfolio, and maybe a business card, perhaps to better contact somebody or something like that to kind of have that. But I wouldn't go beyond that, especially if you're applying for a programming, professional job, and if you have all these flyers of your programs. I just think that it kind of puts you in a very unprofessional place, and I don't know that I would want to do that much. But if you're applying for grad, especially if you're applying for grad that has a lot of maybe living learning requirements or academic initiative requirements or something like that, and there's a specialized grad, or maybe it's a marketing grad or something like that, then sure, bust out those examples a little bit more. But if it's a very generic hall director position or something like that, I would not use those if I were you.
We have another question from Julia. They want to know, do we have any advice for when they are applying for an internal position? Well, I've applied to an internal position here in Rutgers, and I guess this will kind of go back to how I attempted to respond to Allie. You treat it as you would any other position. I don't think you start pulling in favors. I don't think you go over like, hey, I applied to this job. I know you're the chair. Hey, remember how great we worked together? I think then you start getting silly and you really lose your credibility. So I personally think you treat your internal position the same way, if even you're more covert about it and you're extra careful about your discussions. Because again, internal applicants, you've got kind of the ability that you know folks, and that can be an advantage. That can also be a disadvantage, that if anyone knows you and maybe didn't have the greatest experience with you, they might remember it. So I think it's important that for an internal position, you keep it especially professional.
And make sure you notify your supervisor that you're doing that too. If it's an internal position within your own department, your supervisor, like if your supervisor says, well, I would never be able to recommend you for that position, God forbid if they said that, and then you proceed to apply anyway, that creates a huge sort of ruffle right there, right? And you're clearly doing it without some supervisor's recommendation. So that's one thing. But I also think that if it's another department, for example, you're applying at the programming office or something like that, make sure you talk to your supervisor, because your supervisor might know somebody over there that might say, oh yeah, hey, so-and-so is looking for sort of lateral or maybe even a change of scenery. I think she or he would be great, and kind of give you that push that you need from the internal side as well. So I would make sure that you talk to the supervisor. I'm sorry, Julie, I just saw your comments, so I'm trying to read that at the same time. The internal position is work for even more complicated. Haha, thank you. Okay, yes, so yes, if it's in your internal position that you're currently working for, yes, it does become a little complicated, because of the fact that especially you may not be the only candidate, right? And so if your colleagues are potential competition in some ways, you just have to sort of make sure it goes back to the interview gravitas and professionalism, and how are you presenting yourself, and not just the interview, but in staff meetings and different kind of things like that. How are you sort of challenging yourself to act in the position that you're trying to apply for? So think about it in those terms. But yes, if you are a candidate inside your own department, that does become very critical, and you really need to kind of draw some lines a little bit to making sure that you're keeping some balance, because if your supervisor is the one making decision, you certainly don't want to sort of try to make it seem like there's an unfair process or an unethical process sort of happening as well. So yeah, very, very complicated, and you have to do it very, very sensitively. But make sure your supervisor knows, because the last thing they want to be is blindsided with that.
Yep. I don't see that we have any other questions right now in the chat box. And I don't know if we have any more on Twitter right at this moment. We've got just a few minutes, so I'm going to throw out some tidbits of wisdom that we discussed at our session at the annual conference when we were in, where were we at? Penn State. So one thing is transparency in a job search. You need to let your supervisor know that you're job searching. If you're definitely, for sure, if you're getting offers for on-campus, if you haven't already had a conversation with your supervisor, that's the time to let them know, hey, I've got an on-campus. Of course, if you have a really rocky relationship with your supervisor, that's a really difficult thing to kind of navigate, but you're going to have to tell folks eventually. And I think that if you have a good relationship with your supervisor, especially if there's a reference for you, you need to let folks know kind of what's going on, especially if they're then going to have to search to replace you. So that's something that I practice for myself. I'm very transparent with my supervisor regarding any job searches that I've ever been a part of, but I do have a good relationship with that, so I do acknowledge that. Another thing is, if you have an objective on your resume, please get rid of it. Please take it out. It is wasting space. That is the whole purpose of your cover letter. That's kind of just a general housekeeping thing, but if you are one of those folks that uses a template to make your resume, no. Please jazz it up. Please change it. Do not count on Microsoft Word to give you a great resume format, but definitely take out the objective. The whole point is, yes, we know you want to be a great staff member and do great things at this new institution. We got it. Take it out. It's wasting space. Put in the great things that you're doing. Give me your competencies. Give me your achievements. Take that objective section out. Also, at the bottom of your resume, if you have references available upon request, just take that line out. I think it's both presumptuous, and when you're applying for a position, you are 9 times out of 10 giving them your references anyway. Take it out. You don't need it there, and it takes up one extra line of space of information that you could have otherwise. I see that we have another question. It says, barring you can articulate learning. Oh, sorry, I'm reading the bottom thing. Here we go. Hold on. There we go. Sorry, that's what happens when you have multiple things. All right. Do you think there is a time limit on staying in a certain position? Meaning, does it look bad on your resume if you've been in a position for 4 to 5 years? Barring any issues, can you articulate learning throughout your time there? I think the trend now, more and more, is that folks are staying in positions longer for a few reasons. The very first and most obvious being the pyramid is much steeper. There are not as many opportunities to just coast on up to senior level that there maybe were 10, 15, 20 years ago. And so folks are staying put longer. And that's okay. There's been a lot of conversation in MACUHO listservs and a lot of conversation on Talking Stick about folks staying in positions longer. I think that's completely fine, as long as, like you said, Natalie, you can show growth. You can show that you've been involved in other things. You can show that you have not been treading water. I think if you've been in a position for 4 to 5 years at an entry level or mid-level, and mid being very, very broad, and you aren't doing anything to better yourself or expand your horizons or get involved at a regional or national level or get involved on your campus, if you're not doing anything or going anywhere and doing the exact same thing for those 4 to 5 years, I think you have a problem. If you are one of those individuals who's been in a position for 4 to 5 years and you're seeking out new experiences and you're trying different things, and you're getting involved at the national and regional level, and you're going to institutes like NHTI or RELI, I think that that's really okay, because again, the fact of the matter is folks aren't just shooting up through the ranks in the way that they used to. I've been at Rutgers for, this is actually my 6th year, and I ask myself that question all the time. Like, we're here in Truth Tellers, right? I ask that all the time, like, oh crap, have I now reached the point where I should have been gone? And I don't think I have, because again, I am one of those individuals that's doing my very best to continue growing and to continue challenging myself. Agree or disagree, Shigeo?
I would say for the entry level, if you start getting past or even approaching the 5 years at the same position, let's just use the hall director position for example. Like you supervise the same building for 5 years, I think that is a little too late, too long to stay at one particular job. Now, yes, you talked about if you can sort of share the growth and everything like that. So, but if there isn't some sort of like a community switch, or this is a I did 3 years with first years and 2 years with upperclassmen, or some sort of a change in the middle that clearly articulates some kind of change, I do believe that 5 years is too long if you're in an entry-level position. Clearly, if you're in a mid-level position or anything like that, that's a little bit different. But if you're in an entry-level position for 5 years, for the same exact position for 5 years, I do believe that it is a little longer. I'm gonna just be honest. If I saw that, and then because I would wonder about that person's ambition a little bit. Are they looking to change? And then why are they leaving now when they were so comfortable for 5 years? There could be multiple reasons, like you need to stay close to family and all those other kind of things, but within the institution, I would want to see a little bit of growth and change.
Well, we're kind of up on time right now. If anyone wants to send Shigeo or I questions on Twitter, we can absolutely respond to them. Also, we don't have our email addresses on here. I'll put mine in the chat box for everyone. But thank you all so much for your time. Thank you for your attention. I hope that this was helpful for everybody. And please, please, please continue doing the great work that you do. Continue challenging yourself. Continue challenging and supporting the staff members that you oversee. And learn about these competencies because they're not going away. They are absolutely the way to gauge your best practices. And our sincerest hope is that every single one of you is the top candidate in your next job search.
And Timothy, I saw your question. We're running out of time, so if you can go ahead and email Debbie or myself, and we'd be happy to answer those questions for you. There was a really interesting question that came in that probably took a little bit more time than I probably would need to answer that question. Absolutely, we'll be happy to reach out to you, and then we'll start a dialogue. Okay?
Thank you all so much. I hope that you have a wonderful, wonderful, it's almost Friday weekend.
Thanks, Debbie and Shigeo. Just for anyone who's still on the line, if you are attending MAPSI, we are doing another webinar on Tuesday, this coming Tuesday, February 23rd, starting at 2 about preparing for MAPSI. So if you are planning to come, please consider joining us. And if you need that contact information, please reach out to us and we can get that to you. Thank you. Have a great day, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye, everybody. Are you still there, Shigeo?
Yep.
All right. Let's see who's still on here.
Stop the recording, though.